Morning, everyone. Good morning. A warm welcome to our learning program. Today's learning is dedicated in memory of Ami Bas Aryeh, Paul Casimir, Yom Yechir ben Moshe Eliezer, Shlomo Yechir ben Moshe Eliezer, Ben Sion ben Yitzchak, Aryeh ben Shimon, Leah Bas Faivel, Avram Mordechai ben Moshe Katner, as well as the Yortzites for today, Chaya Sarah Bas Sipora Merton, and Yeshua Chaim ben Shmuel Fraser, Bela Bas Akiva Gurovitz, Eliyahu Michal ben Moshe Meir Pins, Dvorah Bas Reuven Gittel Bas Yitzchak Yaakov Robbins, Shalom ben Elia Lee. Wish all their respective families long life and only simchas. So we are studying this morning, we've been discussing about Shemitah, the concept of the sabbatical. Let me just say good morning to all those that have said good morning to me. Be quite remiss of me not to. Good morning, Carol. Good morning, Caroline, Mervyn, David, Estelle, and Martin. Good morning to each and every one of you, as well as all of those that are joining us from across the world on this special learning program. So we've been discussing till now the idea, the concept, the notion of Shemitah, the idea of the sabbatical, and we have given various explanations from some of the greatest sages as to the idea of what the point of Shemitah is. Why would we work 6 years and then leave the land, the field fallow? And we suggested that one explanation could be that it is to show, to relinquish our control, so that we don't believe that this world is all about us, our ownership. We recognize there's something above us that really is running the world. We spoke about the idea of the land laying fallow, recognizing the kedusha, the sanctity of Israel, etc., etc. Many more explanations. But today I want to take a look at the idea that underpins the Shemitah, and that is really the idea of bitachon, the idea of trust. Now, we asked a question yesterday, and many have had several attempts at trying to solve the old chestnut, and that is, what is the difference between faith, emunah, and bitachon, trust? Right? If I was to ask you do you believe in God? You would say, of course I believe in God, right? I believe in God with my whole heart. It's one of the basic tenets in Judaism, one of the principles of faith enunciated by the Rambam, by Maimonides. Belief in God, belief there's only one God, right? What about if I said, do you trust God, right? You know that my Rosh Hashiva used to say in a cryptic fashion, he used to say, that in God we trust. We all trust in God, right? But where do we find in God we trust? We find it on the American dollars, right? You find the words in God we trust. Everyone believes and trusts in God. The only question is, what is their God? For some it is God, and so for others it is money. But putting that to one side, bearing in mind the present company, so what's the difference between faith and trust? And this is a question we could ask across all walks and areas of life. So, for example, in your own relationships, trust is the bedrock. Trust, we would say, is the foundations of a good marriage is trust. If you don't have trust, if you can't trust somebody, then how can you build a relationship? And yet there is also the idea of being faithful, right, as opposed to being unfaithful. So what's the difference between trust and faith? Okay, if you want to share your suggestions, I'm going to share an approach found in Maimonides, Rambam, and the Chazon Ish. And the idea goes something like this. The Chazon Ish was the first one to, I think, formulate it and to bring it to bear. And that is, the idea is that they are really two halves of the same coin. Faith is one side and trust is the other. The Maimonides describes in terms of us having a tree, and you have fruit that the tree produces. The faith, he says, our faith is that tree. We have deep roots. The roots, of course, are our ancestors that have implanted and fused us with faith in God, faith in Jewish in our Jewish heritage, in our eternal values. That is the tree. But the fruits that the tree bears, that is the trust in God, that whatever happens, right, God is with us. And therefore, trust is really an outgrowth of that faith, right? If I have faith, then I can go on to having trust, to trusting somebody, to trusting God that He is with me, right? So, what does it mean by having trust in God, right? It would mean, for example, that whatever happens in my life, I believe, I trust God that it is, for example, all for the best, that God is looking after me, that God is caring for me, that God is by my side, watching over me. That is trust. So, trust is in our daily lives, it's manifest in the way that we see and behave in our daily interactions in the world, right? If a person trusts in God, then they're not going to necessarily they're not going to work 24 hours, 7 days a week, right? So if I stop working for Shabbat and I take Shabbat off, I don't work on Shabbat, is that faith or is that trust? I would suggest that that is trust. We trust that God will provide, right? I believe there's a God, but I trust that He will provide. So, for example, you could have a thief, right? Now, a thief may have faith, but not trust God. He believes in God. He may even, before he carries out the robbery, he may say to himself a little prayer: "Please God, protect me, look after me, let me be successful." He may have faith, but if he had trust, then he wouldn't carry out the robbery. He would know that in God we trust, and therefore the same money that you think you're going to acquire and get through a robbery, you could equally get through God giving it to you through the premium bonds or through a reward through the Inland Revenue and everything else. So what we are saying, friends, is this morning, and good morning to all those that are still joining us late, taken register already, is that we have these two fundamental principles, which are two halves of the same coin: faith and trust in God, right? Faith in God means that I have this belief is that when I'm sitting there, what my thoughts are, what my emotions are, I believe in God. I believe that whatever hardship, whatever I'm going through, right? God is there for me. God will see me through this. But trust is something that's manifest in the way that we live our lives, in our daily actions. It's manifest in the way that we go about living and conducting ourselves, be it in business or in our interactions with other people. It's having that trust. So I have done, for example, trust in the context which we are discussing in the sabbatical. So therefore, the farmer that I met, which we discussed about yesterday, he has tremendous bitachon. He has faith as well, but he has tremendous trust in God. And he says that, he knows God's provided for him. The same way he provided for him yesterday and the day before, so he is going to provide for him for his needs for the next day and the day after. That is trust, right? As opposed to faith, which is something more, something that we have in our minds, in our hearts, but it's not necessarily manifest in our daily actions. Okay, so that I apologize, it's a bit abstract this morning. We have demonstrated the difference between having faith and trust. Let's just make it a bit more real and bring it down to earth for you from the lofty concept of sabbatical, Shemitah, bringing it down to relationships. So we know, and we've mentioned before, the idea from that Rabbi Tatz brings from the mystics, that whatever we find in this world is merely there as an analogy for us to be able to understand our relationship with God. So our relationship with other people is as an analogy, a lesson, a moshel, a parable for us to be able to then relate to God. So if we understand what faith and trust is between us and another person, right, between us and our spouses and our children and our parents, then we will understand what it means to have faith and trust in God. Okay, so faith, right? What is the difference between faith and trust? So I don't know if you ever played this game when you were younger, but you say to somebody, "Do you trust me?" What happens is the person will then stand with their back to you, and you will say, "Right, fall back into my arms." Right? Fall back into my arms. And if they're not too heavy, then you will catch them, and that will demonstrate, right, their trust in you. They're demonstrating their trust. They trust. They put their trust in your hands. That is trust, right? Faith is, for example, that I know that you always have my best interests at heart. Trust, as we said, is the fruit. It's the way that faith very often is manifest. In fact, trust is, if you want, it builds on our faith. So faith and trust are both essential. If you don't have faith in another person, right, then you cannot really build a relationship with them. But trust is the way that it's manifest, the outcome, right? The produce which comes from having that faith. It's the next step up, if you want. Faith is the building blocks and the foundations, and trust is, as it were, the next level up in our relationships. And as we said, it's not just in terms of God, but it's in terms of all our relationships. Do we have faith? How strong is our faith? What happens when we're tested? Do I trust you? Right? If I trust you, right? I'll give you another example of trust, because I can see that we may be struggling with this, right? If I'm going away on holiday, right? I believe you have my best interest at heart. But let's say I've got a diamond earrings, right? Do I trust you to look after it? I believe that you've got my best interest at heart. I believe that you love me and care for me. But do I trust you? Do I trust you to give you and look after something? Do I trust you with my life? That's already another level. And that is what we are talking about with Shmita, which was the paragon, the example of what it means to have not just faith, but trust in God. So it's a beautiful idea. We're going to stop there for today, and we'll move on to something different. We've got a double Sedra this week, so we have to move on tomorrow. Lovely to see you joining us. Andrea, Rachel, I think we said hello to everyone else. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in a path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil, and my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days. Memorial prayer. Adonai Lamim Zacho Es Nishmos Chaya Sarah Bas Sipora Merton Yeshua Chaim Ben Shmuel Fraser Bela Bas Akiva Gurvitz Eliyahu Michael Ben Moshe Meir Pins Developer Bas Reuven Gito Bas Yitzchak Yaakov Robbins Shalom Ben Eli Ali and Leah Bas Bible Yirmiyahu Ben Moshe Eliezer Ami Bas Aryeh Paul Casimir Shamichia Ben Moshe Eliezer Ben Tzil Ben Yitzchak Aryeh Ben Shimon Abram Mordechai b'Moshe Katnashel Choli Lamam Bagad Eden Teimenu Chosam Lachim Balarachamim Yasirem B'Seisei Kanaf Abli Olamim B'Sosach Esishvasam Anay Nachlasam Yanuch B'Shlomish Gavam V'Namar Amen. Going to give you a little quiz question now as we finish off with the Refuah Shlema, and that is, when you had your vaccine, I'm just looking down the list, I think everyone here has had at least one, if not two vaccinations, okay? Your COVID vaccine, was that a matter of faith or trust? Did you take that on the back of faith or trust? Answers in the chat box, please. And now, Refuah Shlema. Misha Berach Avseinu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov Moshe Aaron David Shlomo Yivarech Rapes Achaylim Ba'avu Shana Mispalim Ba'avuram Pis V'Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachem Aleichem Lachem Fusam Yishlach Lem Refuah Shlema L'Shmaim B'Cholim B'Sof Shach V'Yisrael Refuah Nefesh Refuah Guf Hashavak Zman Karev V'Namar Amen. So everyone seems to be that it was trust. So the answer is correct, which means we've understood the concept this morning, the complicated idea. I asked several very learned people earlier, and they weren't able to distinguish. So I'm glad that we have, in a few minutes, managed to make that vital distinction between faith and trust. So we trusted, right? We trusted the scientists. We trusted the medical practitioners when we had our vaccine, okay? But we also, at the same time, had faith, didn't we, that the government and those that are carrying out the research, right, have the best interests of the nation at heart. So it started with faith and it moved on to trust. Okay? Anyways, that's just my thoughts for the day. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, same time, same place. Don't be late. We won't wait. All the best.